360 feedback can be an excellent instrument in the hands of trained experts, if you will. 360 feedback essentially is a tool. It's much like a hammer. If you think about a hammer can be used to build things. It can be used constructively. And I also think about when one of my sons was 2 years of age, if I was working on the house and he got a hold of a hammer, not only could it be destructive, but it could be in fact dangerous. And we have many managers that come to us and tell us that our ExcelView 360 process that we have, where they are able to go through the 360 feedback and process it over the phone with a trained coach, has been very constructive, very helpful. It's helped them focus on certain areas that they want to develop in, and that's great. However, we've also had some managers that come to us and say that they've been a part of a 360 process at their previous employer or with another organization, for example, where it was indeed completely destructive. It was not helpful at all. In fact, it served to undermine their productivity. In one case that I'm aware of, it actually served to help the individual choose to leave the organization after receiving feedback. Now, when you ask them what some of the differences were, it's clear to me that there are certain things to avoid if you are implementing 360 feedback. I want to share with you 3 very clear things that you want to avoid if you are implementing 360 feedback, whether it be for 2 people or 2,000 managers. These 3 things you want to keep in mind and stay away from. Number 1 is don't just launch into the 360 feedback without fully explaining the process to not only the people receiving the feedback, but also the people giving the feedback. You want to explain the fact that it is purely developmental, and we recommend, by the way, that you keep it developmental if you're just starting for the first time. There is a way and a manner and a time factor to move it to be more evaluative in a relationship, but essentially you want to keep the 360 feedback very focused on a developmental tool. Secondly, don't do the 360 feedback in isolation. We always recommend that you also combine the 360 feedback with a psychometric or behavioral-based tool. The reason for that is some 80% of the feedback that a manager will receive will actually be behaviorally based as opposed to skill-based. In other words, when the feedback comes in, it doesn't mean that these are things that a manager cannot do. It really shows you observations that the team make based on their perspective. So if you have a manager, for example, who is very, very extroverted, fast-paced, big picture oriented, for example, and if that manager is managing a team that is much more introverted, much more analytical and detail-oriented, you're going to hear very, very distinct and different feedback than if that manager was managing a team of people that was similar to her or his behavioral style. You're going to hear things like, my manager is unrealistic with deadlines and goals, my manager talks too much and doesn't listen as much. Those sorts of things will come out in the feedback. So it's very important to avoid just doing a 360 feedback in isolation. Third and finally, don't just hand them the feedback and say, here you go, read it. That in and of itself can be extremely demotivating and detrimental. There might be some controversial content in the feedback that requires some context. They need to review it with their manager or perhaps even a trained external coach. What we do is when we're implementing 360 feedback, we're very clear up front with organizations or managers so they understand what the process is all about, what they can expect, what the goals are, the fact that we're here to help them, the fact that it's developmental. We have a clear process before they get on the phone to review their feedback from the sort of the peace and quiet of their own office, that they've read through it, they understand where they're going, and when they're meeting online with a coach, this coach is going to be trained with the expertise to review the feedback of the 360, but also to build a bridge with the psychometric and behavioral-based understanding, and that creates a context that really can be much more productive in terms of helping that manager move forward with 2 or 3 development action plans that they want to focus on over the next 12 to 24 months. So if you want to implement a successful 360 feedback process, I highly recommend that you avoid those 3 points that we just mentioned.